Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Avenue A, where we talk acting, networking, and the industry. I'm your host, Kelsey Bentz, and thanks for joining us on another Friday evening. We have another really special guest this evening, so thank you so much for tuning in. I hope everyone has their cocktail or they're snuggled in bed or on the couch, because that is the best place to be when you're tuning into Avenue A. If you are watching, feel free to drop a comment to say hi and say where you're watching from. I love to see who tunes in and who's watching and who's with us, because this is a live broadcast, so it's super fun to see who's joining us on this lovely Friday evening. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. I'm joined by a super special guest tonight. Her name is Nikka Troy. Nikka Troy is a New Orleans-based artist and filmmaker. She has experience as a freelance stagehand, writer, and editor. She's accumulated experience with local multimedia companies such as Lede Nola, where she began as a Lede Fellow journalist, covering stories following the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement. She holds a firm belief in the importance of storytelling culture and how it affects society, which is one reason she co-conceived her budding production company stationed in New Orleans called Girls in Color LLC, where she stands as CEO and Executive Director. So without further ado, let's welcome on Nikka. Hello.
Hi. How are you?
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is so fun.
It is fun. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you about just your production company and your experience as an artist. You have such a wide range of experience, which I love interviewing artists who I call multi-hyphenate, because they have experience in a lot of different modes. So let's just jump right in. First, I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit more about your own journey as an artist, and then what led you to co-conceive Girls in Color LLC?
So, it's a funny story when I talk about Girls in Color, because initially it wasn't even supposed to be a production company. Like, if you were to tell me, like, my freshman year in college that I would have wanted to do a production company leaving college, I probably would have laughed at you, because it was so beyond anything that I wanted to do. So just a little backstory about me. I started performing when I was 3 years old. My mom, she just put me into dancing school. I started dancing, and then singing was more of a passion for me all the way up until, I want to say, 8th grade, when I started going to acting schools and I started getting like experience with auditioning. So it wasn't a surprise when I got to college that I was going to go into something performance-based. And honestly, that was the goal with leaving college. I was going to leave college with this idea of being a great actress and a great writer. I never thought beyond the scope of, being a writer or being an actress on film. It came with later knowledge where I wanted to actually get into the technical backstage aspects of filmmaking, um,
Mm.
because it was so far beyond anything that I was really aiming for.
And how did that come about? How did that sort of shift into being interested in the production element of film versus, pursuing acting only?
So it was through experience, the great thing about the University of New Orleans, you have a lot of filmmakers there who call on to college students and ask them to be on set. So it was that I was able to work on some theater productions behind the scenes, and I just fell in
Mm.
love with that, more in love with just being in front of the screen, you know. And there were a lot of things, because I want to say when I first started college, I wanted to be a casting agent, because
Mm.
going through the process of, auditioning, yeah, it was always a callback, but never the role. But then
Yeah.
as time went on and time went on and time went on, I started noticing that I wasn't even fitting the roles that they were having calls for. So
Mm. Mm-hmm.
in my mind, I just wanted to change the scope of that. So I thought maybe being a casting agent would be a start, getting
Yeah.
more faces that looked like myself or like other people of color on.
Right.
Um, it wasn't until studying abroad in France I was able to study French film, artists like Truffaut, and I fell in love with filmmaking. It was then, and so back in 2017, when it was just the thought, I was just only into like I said, the acting basis of everything, and so I was just getting into the technical part. I really wasn't thinking about doing a production company. When I initially went up to my friends, who then on became my colleagues, under Girls in Color, I wanted to do a podcast. That was,
Oh, no way.
yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed our conversations. I started really getting into like podcasting. One of my favorite podcasts is Missing Richard Simmons. If you've
Mm-hmm.
ever heard of it,
I've
um,
heard of it. I haven't listened to it.
it
Yeah.
was one of my favorite things, and so I really wanted to do a podcast where we talked about girls like us who were just
Mm.
getting into film. We were talking about film theory, about characterization, things that we were talking like about in our own circle. I
Mm.
wanted to do a podcast for that. And so I'll never forget, it was like maybe 2 or 3 days before our last year of college started. And we met at the Starbucks in Slidell, Louisiana. I call it the Boondocks because it's so country to me.
Yeah.
And we sat there for probably like the last half of that day, and that last half of that day turned into weeks of meetings and just brainstorming about what we wanted the podcast to look like. And then I want to say it was Brianna who said, well, to be honest, I have some films that I've been writing, and we all were, because we were all filmmakers and writers in our own right. Um, and she was like, I would love to put it on the Girls in Color. And we all agreed. And so when we noticed that we were getting into the idea of producing films, that's what it transitioned to. And that
Mm.
wasn't until I want to say mid 2018 where we finally had figured out what it is we wanted to come out of Girls in Color.
Got
So
it.
it's been an amazing journey, to be honest.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It's so cool to hear how the idea started, and then sort of with collaboration and with a lot of thought, it turned into something, or it morphed into something different. I think that represents sort of the spirit of art and creation so well, because things are always like fluid, right? Ideas are always moving and shifting, and when you bring in collaborators, it becomes a totally different thing from maybe the thing that you first envisioned.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, that's why now when I think about where we were to where we are now, I laugh. I just can't help but laugh because it's such a fascinating journey. Um, and being able to look back at that journey has helped me so much with figuring out where we want to take this in the future and who are the people we want to reach out to in the future. So
Mm,
it really has been an amazing journey for us.
yeah. So, part of Girls in Color's motto is that it stretches to break the mold of the visual story and work as a safe space for self-identifying women creatives. Can you talk about the intention behind this motto? How does Girls in Color strive to break the mold of the visual story?
So I want to say this all goes back to when we were just a thought. I want to say 2017. That was when that big controversy about the Ghost in the Shell movie had came out.
Mm.
And I know that there was a lot of pushback from Asian Americans about Scarlett Johansson taking on the role as Motoko. I think that's how you say it, in
Yeah.
Ghost in the Shell. And so I was really interested in it. I had never really gone into anime that much, but I was really interested in that topic because I had never heard of any other community outside of, Black people talking about representation and how it affected them in
Right.
America. So I ended up reading this article from The Atlantic by John Hudson, and it was entitled, Why Do the Japanese Draw Their Animes as White? And I
Mm.
thought, I was like, wait, what? And so as I started going through it, he was actually quoting a New York blogger named Julian Abagando, I think. I want to say
Okay.
that's his name. Julian Abagon. And they started going into the default human concept and how, even though when Americans looked at anime, they saw white characters.
Mm-hmm.
When the Japanese looked at their characters, they saw Japanese characters, and all of that floated into representation to me, which was a big topic um, during that time. And then as I dove more into representation, I really started to see how representation was a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Um, this idea of putting people on platforms, giving them platforms for like people like me to say, oh, wait, well, I can relate to this character because they look like me. But really and truly, there's a difference between representing a community, um, just giving it representation rather than giving them diversity in representation, diversity in character. And
Mm.
that's all of what our motto is about changing that mold, inviting in new voices, inviting in new cultures of people to talk about their experiences, to write on their experiences, because the mold is very default. And he even stretched even more so, and he said that if you were to draw a stick man and gave it to your average American, they would automatically assume that that character is white, and that all goes into how we build characters, how we mold stories.
Mm.
So that is all of what that motto really is about: changing the way we mold stories, changing the way, changing who we invite in,
Mm.
making an atmosphere of film and writing that's more inclusive to people who may have the stories but not the technique. So
Right.
I know that
That
was a
sounds like
mouthful.
no, that was amazing. That was very enlightening. And it sounds to me like correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it's also about shifting the narrative to like away from, what it always has been, which is very white centric. And it sounds like what you're saying is it's different from just adding in a person of color to the main white centric narrative, right? Like that's what we're trying to move away from and instead focus on different narratives and not just adding someone into the existing one. Is that right?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's actually perfect. I was recently reading an article from the Washington Post regarding Jamie Chung from Lovecraft Country, if you've ever heard of it,
Yes.
and she was talking about her character Jiha and how she had never. It took her 10 years of being an actress to even find a character remotely close to her own culture. And even still, with
Mm.
this one character, she had to do so much research. And to hear that, it's both enlightening because it makes me wake up as a writer,
Mm.
but it's also disheartening because I just can't imagine, like, she's only one Asian American woman actress. Imagine all
Right.
of the other Asian American women who go through this.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that that's a concept that's taken for granted a lot in the industry. Like it's not in the grand scheme, it doesn't feel like it's being talked about that much. I guess more so in recent years, but even then, like we're still seeing, like you were referencing, how Scarlett Johansson was cast as a role meant for an Asian person. Like that's still sort of happening, and it's a little shocking to see that it's not only still happening, but that like I don't know, yeah, there's some disconnect happening there.
And I think that partially goes into the fact that, like I said, we use representation as a pacifier. It's more of a, hey, I'm
Mm,
tired of people talking about us not having enough representation on our films, so let's scatter representation about. And I
yeah.
feel like that's such, I'm looking for the word, it's such a mundane way to view art because art
Mm.
is so colorful. To only see it through one default look, it kind of takes away from the entire point of creating art, creating screenplays so that we can see them for the masses or wherever I'm going with that.
No, I think that's totally spot on. The sort of analogy that came to my head was, it's like art is supposed to be about breaking the mold, right? But if we're so concerned with a certain mold and having people fit into these narratives, right? These molds, like that, those two things are so contradictory, because art exists, in my opinion, to express things that haven't been expressed before, and communicate, the human experience.
Very true, very true. And that's just how we see it. And like as we have evolved and we take in stories, because we've done a lot of screenplay collectives so far, and that's
Mm.
one thing we look for when we're talking about collabing with other women. We want to know whether or not you're going to come in and give us something different, because
Mm.
the same is boring, you know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So Nika, I want to shift a little bit and talk about the business side of Girls in Color, because I'm really interested in your experience sitting in the role of CEO and executive producer. So, in what ways has being a CEO and an executive producer challenged you, and also how have you navigated those challenges?
Oh wow. um it's a challenge. That's just first and foremost. But I want to say that most of the challenges that I've experienced as an executive director, it's even weird saying it, um, have been mental. It's been really just fear stopping me from moving because, like I said, I've never thought of myself as this person to run a company. It was something that I was always running from. The
Mm.
idea of taking on a leadership role, especially over a production, was never something that um, I was interested in. But what has helped me navigate through this entire experience is learning how to collab with other people. I was just talking about this yesterday in a meeting that I was having with Lead, and I was talking about leadership and why leadership is so important. And in leadership, you have to regard your community. So it's been hard mentally, but physically, to have the people that I have around me, we carry sort of the same vision, sort of the same passion. That's what makes it so much easier to be in this role.
That's so great to hear. Like your perspective on that is very warm. I think I relate to the fears of being in a leadership position so much. I think as a fellow like trained actor, we are trained to take on the vision of someone else, right? Like that's what we're like, to be a vessel essentially. And I think it's so different to be, in that leadership position, and to be like, okay, like I am the one at the, helm of this ship kind of driving, but it does totally come back to the idea of ensemble, right? Like in the arts, it's all about the community and the collaboration.
And really and truly, especially when you're dealing with a production company, that executive director, that leader per se, is just to make sure that everything is organized. But if you're going on set just to be a tyrant, no one is going to want to work with you. And so
Amen.
I know, just having experience of working with different people and working on certain sets. Mid 2019, I worked on like this TV show production set, and like you can definitely see like the superiority complexes come out of certain people, and that is
Yeah.
something that I never want to exhibit for anyone that works with me. I always open, especially when we're coming together for meetings, especially since we've been dealing with this horrid pandemic.
Mm.
I like to open things with, how are you today? You know,
Mm.
let's check in, because it's not good to just hop straight into work, especially when we all have our own separate lives.
Yeah, yeah. And that really takes everyone to the same level, right? It gets them connected and ready to do the work of collaborating, because that's really what it's about. It's a team effort in any artistic endeavor.
Yeah, definitely, I
Yeah.
agree. I don't think a lot of people really regard um, teamwork in the film
Mm.
industry, at least from my experience. But going through COVID and just realizing that life is too short, if the team isn't coming to you, you have to learn how to look for that team and just,
Mm.
you know, use your intuition. You know who's good for you, you know who's not. That's
Yeah.
the biggest thing.
Mm. So, in the last 5 years, what have you gotten better at saying no to?
Um, Definitely no to fear. That's
Mm.
that's the first thing. Because fear is the catalyst to a lot of people not getting anywhere. That's that one main obstacle. Worried
Mm.
about what everyone has to say about you, worried about what people are going to think about your projects. So I've learned to say no to that fear. At this point, you either like me or you don't. I don't care, but I'm going to do what makes me happy.
Yeah.
And then another thing I've really learned to say no to is no to not setting boundaries.
Mm.
Oh my goodness.
That's
Especially
huge.
yes, especially in this industry where you're so eager to be a part of everything. You're
Yeah.
so eager to get your name out. You will get in a habit of saying yes to a lot, and that is just really, really, really harmful. And I'm really learning that you really can't say yes. Sometimes it's better to say no. Um, to a lot of things that are taxing. Even working on set, I had to say no to that sometimes. Have to say
Mm.
no to that sometimes because I have my own projects that are going. So it's
Right.
just all about, for me right now, is saying no to fear and saying no to not setting boundaries.
I want to go back to saying no to fear, because that's a big one. I mean, do you have any insight on how you do that? Like, do you know what I mean? To me, like, saying no to fear in concept sounds great, right? But when the actual fear is overwhelming you, how do you navigate through that?
So the first thing for me, you have to figure out, what are you afraid of? And
Mm.
like, what are those things that show you that you're scared of something? And the biggest thing for me was procrastination. I'm heavy on procrastination.
Mm.
And I knew that it was me. I was procrastinating simply because I didn't want to see failure. I didn't want to see doors closing on me.
Yeah.
And so sleeping or lounging around became a better habit than getting to work.
Mm.
And when I saw that, I was like, no, you got to get yourself together, because you have a dream, you have a vision. So that's a
Yeah.
part of it. The part of figuring out any problem that you have is knowing the source, how you act with those fears. And I was definitely
Mm.
acting out of procrastination. Sometimes I still beat myself up about where I feel like I should be and where I am now. But it's all a
Yeah.
learning experience.
Absolutely. So, when you do feel sort of overwhelmed, or you get down on yourself, what do you do to get through that?
So I learned this last year. It was right at the brink of um, COVID, and I had just joined Lead, and I was working under them as a fellow. It's like a junior fellow mentorship role where they were mentoring me as a journalist.
Mm.
And with it, I was covering the Black Lives Matter movement and going out there. And it was this wonderful thing that I was taught at the end of the protest. We went over to the Mississippi River, and they asked everyone to sit along the river. And they said, I don't know what you believe in. I don't know if you believe in the universe. I don't know if you believe in God, but whatever you believe in, give that higher being your worries and throw it into the river. And that's a habit that I've actually been doing, like even recently, like whenever I get too overwhelmed, whenever I'm too frustrated, whenever I feel like I can't handle it, I hop in my car. I stay like 10 to 15 minutes away from Pontchartrain Lake, and I sit at the lake and I give my worries away. Um, and another thing, it is meditating and affirming things into your life. That's what helps me when I'm feeling super overwhelmed. Whenever I hear like a voice that says, you can't do this, I have to affirm, no, I can do this and I'm going to get it done. That's what it's
Yeah,
all about. A positive mindset is the key to most people's success, you know?
absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing your insights on that. I think for those watching, especially if you're in the arts, there's such a tendency, I think, for us to do the negative self-talk, right? But if we're able to do the negative self-talk, then we must be able to also do the positive self-talk, right? So, and that's sometimes hard to remember, but yeah, I love the idea of like that's your version of meditation, right? Going to the lake and sitting there and giving your worries, because at the end of the day, I mean, that's all you can do, right? Like there's only a certain level of control we have over what happens, you
Very
know?
true. Very, very true. And honestly, it was a lesson that I learned from my mom just even before the protest. Right after COVID hit, I started working this really, really cool job that I was obsessed with. It was like one of my best jobs out of college. And I
Mm.
worked there literally for a day before
Oh,
COVID said, oh, we got to cut it off.
yeah.
And I remember just how depressed I was sitting at home. It was hard for me to get out of bed. I remember
Yeah.
I had to close down some productions that we were working on. And as I wrote like the letter to the people that I was working with, I remember just tears just falling from my eyes because I was like, I don't want to quit, but I
Yeah.
don't know how I'm going to get this done. And
Yeah.
the main thing I can say that I get from my mom, she's always like, stop worrying. You're worrying about things you can't change anyway. So what's the
Mm.
sense of worrying, you know?
Mm.
So I've learned to uh, meditate. And like I said, I've learned to affirm because those are the things that make me happy. If
Mm.
you can't tell yourself that you're doing good, then nobody else will. That
Mm.
that's just period. Like if you can't look at yourself every day in the morning, and I know it's hard. I say this all the time. It's very, very difficult to wake up every day and to tell yourself that you're beautiful. To wake up every day and to tell yourself that you're gonna succeed and that you're gonna get through it. It's very, very difficult. But when you can feel the urge of it coming out of your mouth, tell yourself, I am beautiful. Tell yourself, I am successful. I'm going to do great things because it makes a world of difference.
Ugh, amen to that. I mean, that's just, yeah, that is like, period, like you said. Nikka, thank you so much for joining me on Avenue A. It was such a pleasure to hear your insight and to, be led into, your process and your artistic identity. And it was so great to connect with you tonight. And we have a lot of people in the comments saying hi. Rudy,
Oh,
hello.
hi.
Pearson says chills. We
Oh,
have Kathleen.
hi. Oh, my goodness. That's
We have
so
my
cool.
grandma. Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
hi, Grandma.
We have so many awesome people tuning in. Hey, CJ. CJ was my guest last week. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Oh, wow.
So for those watching, if you want to connect with Nikka, you can find her and Girls in Color on Instagram. Those are the right tags, right, Nikka?
They're fantastic. You got it all.
Perfect. So you got the GIC NOLA for the Girls in Color page, and then nikkatroy.gic for her personal page. Give them a like, give them a follow. And thanks again for joining me. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you guys so much. Oh, can I say one thing before we leave?
Please,
Yeah,
yeah.
I want everyone to tune in. Recently, my production company has been working on a production. It's a short anthology film called What She Never Said. And we're getting ready for the promotional shoot for that so that our campaign is going to come up. So I want everyone to tune in and to get excited with us. It's our first film under the company.
Yes.
So excited.
So where's the best place for people to tune in for that? Is Instagram the best?
Instagram is the best. We're going to
Okay.
start a TikTok too, but that's all later. You just follow us on Instagram and you'll get all of that news coming up in the next few weeks.
Perfect. Everyone, get on it right now. Thanks again, Nikka, and have a great weekend.
All right. You have a nice day. Or night.
Thanks. All right, everyone, that concludes another episode of Avenue A. Thanks so much for tuning in, and be sure to follow Nikka and Girls in Color because I think that there's some awesome artistry happening there and amazing projects to come. So do give them a follow, and thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a stellar weekend, and we'll see you next week.